For centuries, this is the image that has been burned into our minds. The Vikings. A terrifying specter from the north, emerging from the mist on dragon-headed longships. They are the barbarians with horned helmets, a historical inaccuracy, by the way, who lived only for plunder, destruction, and chaos. This myth has been perpetuated by medieval chronicles written by their terrified victims, and later, by Hollywood. But what if this picture is dangerously incomplete? What if we have been telling only the smallest, most violent chapter of a much grander and more fascinating story? Today, we are embarking on a journey to rediscover the real Vikings. Forget the simple label of warriors. New archaeological discoveries and a fresh look at ancient texts are revealing a reality far more compelling. The Norse men and women were not just agents of chaos, they were some of the greatest explorers, traders, artisans, and poets the world has ever seen. Their society, often imagined as purely brutal, contains surprising elements of law, order, and even a form of equality that would have been unthinkable in many other parts of the world at the time. This is not about whitewashing history. The Vikings were undoubtedly fierce and their raids were devastatingly real. But to define them solely by their violence is to miss the essence of their civilization. They were masters of adaptation, with a curiosity that stretched from the frozen wastes of the Arctic to the sun-drenched markets of the Middle East. They were farmers who understood the land, shipbuilders who defied the ocean, and storytellers who crafted complex myths about their gods. In this video, we will dismantle the myth piece by piece and replace it with a richer, more truthful portrait. We will see the proof that the Vikings were far more civilized, complex, and sophisticated than popular culture has ever led you to believe. Our first piece of evidence takes us not to a battlefield, but to a bustling, cosmopolitan hub of global trade. If you think the Vikings only traveled to take, think again. While their initial raids were shocking, they quickly evolved into something much more sustainable, a vast and intricate trading network that connected continents. The same longships that could sneak up a shallow river for a surprise attack were also the perfect vessels for carrying goods across vast oceans. They were the container ships of the Viking Age, and their cargo was the lifeblood of a globalized economy. Look at the map. Viking routes stretched further than any European civilization had ever gone before. They established permanent settlements not just in the British Isles, but in Iceland and Greenland. Most famously, Leif Erikson reached the coast of North America nearly 500 years before Columbus, a place they called Vinland. But this was not just about finding new land, it was about finding new opportunities. In the east, they traveled down the rivers of Russia, all the way to the Black Sea and Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Here, they were known as the Varangian Guard, elite mercenaries for the emperor. And what did they trade? From the frozen north, they offered highly priced furs, walrus ivory, and amber. They traded slaves, a tragic but common practice at the time. In return, they brought back treasures that have been found in their homelands, shimmering silk from China, gleaming silver coins minted in Baghdad, fine glassware from the Rhineland, and exotic spices. Towns like Birka in Sweden and Hedeby in what is now Germany were not rough camps, they were bustling, international marketplaces where a Norse merchant might haggle with an Arab trader. This was not a culture isolated in the fjords, it was a culture deeply engaged with the world, driven by a desire for wealth, certainly, but also by an insatiable curiosity and a phenomenal talent for navigation and logistics. Now, let us tackle one of the most persistent myths, that Viking society was a purely masculine world where women were powerless. Nothing could be further from the truth. While it was certainly a patriarchal society, Viking women enjoyed a level of freedom, respect, and legal power that would have made their contemporaries in other parts of Europe gasp. For starters, a Viking man could be away for months or even years on a raid, a trading voyage, or an exploration. During this time, who ran the show? The woman. She was the master of the household, the manager of the farm, the financier of the next expedition. she held the keys to the property, a literal symbol of her authority. This was not a passive role, it required immense skill in administration, agriculture, and craft. Archaeological finds confirm this. Graves of high-status women are filled with scales for weighing silver, tools for weaving, and those symbolic keys, showing they were central to the economic life of the family. But their influence did not stop at the farm gate. Norse women had the right to own property, to inherit it, and to divorce their husbands. If a marriage ended, she could take her original dowry and her own possessions with her. This was a legal right. Furthermore, there is compelling evidence that women could also be leaders. The sagas, our semi-historical written sources, speak of female warriors known as shield maidens, and recent DNA analysis of a famous warrior's grave in Burka confirmed the occupant was, in fact, a woman. While the extent of female combatants is still debated, it shows the concept existed in their worldview. They were not just bystanders to history, they were active participants who helped build the Viking world, wielding significant economic and social power from the home front to, potentially, the front lines. The word Viking practically synonymous with lawlessness. But the truth is, their society could not have functioned, let alone expanded across the globe, without a sophisticated and deeply ingrained legal system. Imagine this, a gathering of free people, men and in some cases, women, meeting in an open field. This was the thing, the Viking assembly. It was not a chaotic mob, but a structured, democratic forum where disputes were settled, laws were made, and leaders were chosen. Every region had its own thing. It was the bedrock of their society. Here, any free man could voice his opinion. Cases were presented, witnesses were called, and evidence was weighed. The community itself acted as the jury. The goal was not necessarily to punish, but to restore balance and prevent endless blood feuds that could tear a community apart. They would decide on compensation, known as wergild or man price, for crimes like murder or theft. This system created a powerful incentive for social order. This respect for law extended beyond the assembly. The most famous legal code from the Viking Age comes from Iceland, the Althing, established in 930, which is one of the world's oldest parliaments. Their laws were not written down at first. A law speaker would memorize the entire legal code and recite it from memory each year, a feat of incredible intellectual discipline. Later, they were carved on rune stones for all to see. This commitment to a transparent, communal process of justice shows a society that valued order and consensus. They understood that for a community to be strong, it needed rules that everyone agreed upon and a peaceful way to resolve the conflicts that are inevitable in any human society. This was the civilized framework that allowed the Viking world to thrive. If you still imagine the Vikings as uncultured brutes, prepare to have your mind changed. Their world was not just one of practical survival, it was a world rich with art, storytelling, and a deep appreciation for beauty. They were poets and artisans of the highest order. Their artistic expression, known as the Inn style, the Boar style, and others, is instantly recognizable for its intricate, interwoven patterns of animals and serpents, carved into wood, bone, and metal. Look at these artifacts. This is not the work of clumsy hands. This is the work of master craftsmen who dedicated their lives to their art. They decorated everything, their ships, their weapons, their jewelry, and even their everyday tools. This animal art was more than just decoration, it was a symbolic language, a way of connecting their world to the power and mystery of the gods and the natural world. A simple wooden chest was not just for storage, it was a canvas for a story. And then there were the words. The Vikings revered their poets, known as skalds. Skaldic poetry was not simple rhyming verse, it was an incredibly complex and sophisticated art form. It used intricate patterns of rhyme and rhythm, and a unique metaphorical system called kenning. In a kenning, a simple concept is described in a poetic riddle. A ship might be called the steed of the sea. A warrior becomes the tree of battle. Gold is the fire of the dragon. Composing and understanding this poetry required a sharp intellect and a deep knowledge of their mythology and culture. These poems preserved their history, celebrated their heroes, and explored the deep questions of life, fate, and death. This love for complex art and language reveals a people with a rich inner life, a civilization that valued the power of the mind and the beauty of a well-crafted object as much as the strength of a sword arm. So, we have seen the evidence. The Vikings were global traders, surprisingly egalitarian for their time, governed by laws, and gifted with artistic and poetic brilliance. But why does this matter today? Because the Viking Age was not a dead end in history. It was a catalyst that helped shape the modern world. Their legacy is not just a memory, it is woven into the very fabric of our lives, especially in the places they settled. Look at the map of the British Isles. Cities like Dublin in Ireland and York in England were founded or massively expanded by the Vikings as trading centers. They connected isolated parts of Europe, stimulating economies and cultural exchange. Their genetic legacy lives on in the people of Scotland, Iceland, and Normandy. Our language is filled with words they gave us. Everyday words like sky, skin, egg, knife, window, and they are all Old Norse in origin. Even the days of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, are named after their gods, Tyr, Odin, Thor, and Frigg. More profoundly, their ideas about governance may have left a mark. The democratic traditions of the Thing assembly, where free people had a voice, echo in the parliamentary systems we see today in Scandinavia and beyond. They were not just destroyers, they were nation builders. In places like Normandy, their descendants, the Normans, would go on to conquer England and change the course of European history. By exploring, trading, settling, and integrating, the Vikings acted as a bridge between cultures, ending the isolation of the early Dark Ages and helping to set the stage for the modern era. They were a complex, multifaceted civilization, farmers and poets, explorers and lawgivers, warriors and traders. To remember them only as raiders is to do a great disservice to history. They were, in so many ways, more civilized than we ever thought.